In the heart of a deadly crimson storm on a distant mining world, a weary miner stumbles upon two starving alien children hiding in the shadows. Unaware that this single act of compassion will set in motion a chain of events that will one day decide his fate on the edge of life and death. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The dust storms on Orion 9 had a way of making even the strongest buildings seem fragile. Red sand whipped across the mining colony, scratching metal walls and rattling loose panels. The shelters stood close together, like people huddling for warmth against the planet's endless winds. Joran Hale walked slowly through the storm, his exosuit filter mask wheezing with every breath. Years of mining had bent his back and worn down his strength. His hands were rough from handling heavy tools, and his knees ached with every step. The company's pain medicine had stopped helping long ago. A sharp voice crackled through his helmet communicator. "Hale, your output is down again this shift." It was Varric, the alien overseer, who seemed to enjoy reminding him of his failures. Joran did not answer. He kept his eyes on the glowing path markers that led toward the residential block. There, a thin blanket and a small ration pack waited for him. The walk home was long, but Joran knew a shortcut. Maintenance Tunnel 7 was off limits to miners, but its security cameras had been broken for years. Taking it saved him 7 minutes, and on days like this, 7 minutes mattered. Inside the tunnel, the air was heavy and stale. Dim amber lights flickered overhead. Pipes ran along the walls, carrying recycled water that tasted like metal. Joran focused on his aching knee, counting the steps until he could rest. Then he heard it. A faint sound, almost lost in the hum of the pipes. It was not the scurry of a rat or the hiss of steam. It was a cough, soft but real. He stopped and turned his head toward the shadows near a ventilation duct. "Hello?" he called, his voice low. There was no answer, but something shifted in the darkness. Joran sighed, thinking it might be one of the colony's rodents. They had adapted too well to the planet and often found their way inside. He was about to move on when the cough came again. This time, it was followed by a small, shaky breath. He switched on his suit's auxiliary light. The beam cut through the gloom and revealed two small figures pressed against the wall. They were children, but not human. Their skin was a pale silver blue, glowing faintly in the dim light. Their large eyes reflected his lamp like mirrors. The smaller child shrank back, but the older one, perhaps 10 years old in human terms, stepped forward slightly. One arm was wrapped protectively around the younger. "Are you enforcement?" the older asked, voice barely above a whisper. Joran shook his head. "Just a miner." The older child's shoulders eased, but the tension in their eyes remained. He noticed how thin they were. Their clothes were torn and hung loosely from their frames. The younger child's breathing was uneven, with a wet, rattling sound that Joran recognized. Dust lung. Without treatment, it could fill the lungs with fluid in days. The mining colony had strict rules about outsiders. These children were clearly from Kalira, a world destroyed in the last war. They should have been in a refugee center, but Joran knew those places. Kalirans were low priority. Too alien for sympathy, too different to be useful to the company. He asked how long they had been there. The older child stayed silent, but the younger coughed again. Joran's mind told him to walk away. His quarters were barely big enough for himself. His rations were measured exactly for his needs. Harboring unregistered aliens was a crime that could end his contract and send him off-world in chains. But he remembered a time before the mines. A time before debt had trapped him here. A time when he believed that helping someone mattered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his meal bar. It was dry and tasteless, but it was food. He broke it in half and held it out. The older child hesitated, then took both pieces, giving the larger one to the younger. The smaller child ate quickly, as if afraid the food would vanish. "I'm Joran," he said quietly. "What are your names?" After a pause, the older replied, "Lyra. This is my brother, Kale." Joran nodded. "Lyra. Kale. Follow me. Stay quiet. Tomorrow we'll figure something out." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Why would you help us?" Joran had no clear answer. He only knew he could not leave them here. "Because no one else will," he said at last. The residential block was silent when they arrived. Most miners were already asleep, saving their strength for the next shift. A few neighbors peeked through half-open doors as Joran passed with the children. "You've lost your mind, Hale," whispered an older miner from 2 doors down. "Those kids will bring enforcement here by morning." Joran ignored him and kept walking. Inside his quarters, the space felt even smaller with 3 people. The walls hummed with the sound of the colony's life support systems. Joran sealed the door behind them with a hiss of compressed air. The storm outside roared against the metal walls, but inside, the children sat quietly on the floor. Joran removed his helmet and set it aside. He looked at them and knew his life had just changed. He did not know what tomorrow would bring. He did not know if they would be discovered, but he knew one thing. He would not let them face the storm alone. Joran closed the door to his quarters and leaned against it for a moment. The hiss of the seal shutting out the storm was a small comfort. Inside, the air was warmer, but the space was cramped. A narrow cot, a metal table, and a single storage locker filled most of the room. The 2 alien children stood near the wall, their wide eyes scanning every corner. Lyra kept her arm around Kale, who coughed softly into his sleeve. Joran could hear the wet rattle in the boy's chest. He knew the signs of dust lung too well. It was a sickness that spread fast in the colony's thin air. Without treatment, it could take a life in days. He opened his ration pack and placed the contents on the table. A protein bar, a pouch of water, and a small packet of dried fruit. It was not much, but it was all he had until the next supply drop. He pushed the food toward them. "Eat," he said simply. Lyra hesitated, then guided Kale to the table. The boy's hands trembled as he unwrapped the bar. He took small bites at first, then ate faster, as if afraid it would be taken away. Lyra drank half the water and gave the rest to her brother. Joran watched in silence, feeling the weight of his decision settle on him. He asked where they had come from. Lyra's voice was quiet but steady. "Kalira," she said. Joran nodded slowly. He had heard of the war that destroyed their world. Millions displaced, scattered across the galaxy. Most never found safety. She told him they had been smuggled onto a cargo ship months ago. When it docked at Orion 9, they slipped away before the crew could hand them to corporate security. They had been hiding in unused tunnels ever since. Food was scarce. Water was worse. Kale had been sick for weeks. Joran listened, his jaw tight. He knew the company's rules. Outsiders without work permits were considered a threat. If found, they would be sent to the outer camps, where survival was unlikely. Helping them was a crime, but leaving them was something he could not do. Outside his door, footsteps passed in the hallway. Joran moved quickly to dim the lights. He motioned for the children to stay quiet. Through the small gap under the door, he saw shadows pause. A voice whispered, "He's hiding something." Then the footsteps moved on. Joran exhaled slowly. The colony was a place where secrets did not last long. Walls were thin, and people were desperate for rewards. Turning someone in could mean extra rations or a lighter work shift. He knew it was only a matter of time before someone reported him. He pulled a folded blanket from his locker and spread it on the floor. "You can sleep here tonight," he said. Lyra nodded, helping Kale lie down. The boy's breathing was uneven, but his eyes closed quickly. Exhaustion had claimed him. Joran sat on the edge of his cot, staring at the wall. Memories came uninvited. A younger version of himself, living on a green world far from here. A time when he believed in fairness, when he thought hard work was enough to build a good life. That belief had been stripped away by years of quotas, fines, and endless debt. He looked at the children again. They were proof that even in the harshest places, there were still lives worth protecting. He felt a quiet resolve forming. He would keep them safe, no matter the cost. The night passed slowly. The storm outside roared against the metal walls. Inside, the only sounds were Kale's breathing and the hum of the air recycler. Joran did not sleep much. He kept thinking about how to get medicine for the boy without drawing attention. In the early hours, a sharp knock broke the silence. Joran froze. Lyra's eyes opened instantly, alert and wary. He motioned for her to stay still. The knock came again, followed by a low voice. "Joran, it's Merrick. Open up." Joran unlocked the door just enough to see his old friend's face. Merrick's eyes darted past him into the room. "You've got trouble," he said. "Enforcement drones are scanning the block. They're looking for someone." Joran's stomach tightened. He knew who they were looking for. Merrick stepped closer. "Hide them. Now." Joran shut the door and turned to Lyra. "There's a storage shaft under the floor panel," he whispered. He lifted the metal plate, revealing a narrow space just big enough for the two of them. Lyra helped Kale inside, then climbed in after him. Joran replaced the panel and moved the table over it. A moment later, heavy footsteps stopped outside his door. A sharp knock echoed through the room. "Sleeping up," a voice commanded. Joran took a deep breath and stepped forward. He knew this was only the beginning. The knock on the door was sharp and heavy. Joran's heart pounded as he stepped toward it. He opened it just enough to see Merrick's face. The older miner's eyes were tense. "Enforcement drones are scanning the block," Merrick said. "They're looking for someone. You need to be careful." Joran nodded without speaking. He closed the door and turned to Lyra and Kale. The children were already alert, their eyes wide. "Hide," he whispered. He pulled up the floor panel and motioned for them to climb into the narrow storage shaft. Lyra helped her brother down first, then followed. Joran replaced the panel and slid the table over it. A moment later, the sound of boots echoed in the hallway. There was another knock, louder this time. "Open up," a voice commanded. Joran took a deep breath and unlatched the door. Varric stood there, tall and imposing in his dark uniform. Two enforcement drones hovered behind him, their sensors glowing red. "Routine inspection," Varric said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. His eyes scanned the small room, lingering on the table. "You've been quiet lately, Hale," Varric said. "Too quiet. Productivity down. Neighbors whispering. Makes me wonder what you're hiding." Joran kept his face blank. End. Nothing to hide, just tired. Varric walked slowly around the room, tapping the walls with a gloved hand. The drones floated closer to the table. Joran's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to stay still. After a long pause, Varric turned back toward the door. "Remember, Hale," he said, "rules keep this place alive. Break them and you won't last a day." With that, he left, the drones following him into the hallway. Joran waited until the sound of footsteps faded before moving the table. He lifted the panel, and Lyra and Kale climbed out. Kale's breathing was heavier now, his face pale. Joran knelt beside him. "We need to get you medicine," he said. Lyra shook her head. "The clinics won't help us. They'll call enforcement." Joran knew she was right. but he also knew Kale would not survive without treatment. As they spoke, Lyra revealed something she had not told him before. She and Kale had escaped from a corporate transport ship months ago. On that ship, they had overheard workers talking about hidden supply caches left behind after the war. These caches contained food, water, and medical supplies. If found, they could help hundreds of people in the colony's lower levels. Joran realized the value of what she was saying, but it also meant the children were in even greater danger. If the company learned they had this knowledge, they would be hunted without mercy. The decision weighed heavily on him. Helping them meant risking his own life, but doing nothing meant watching Kale's condition worsen. That night, Joran sat on his cot staring at the wall. The storm outside rattled the metal panels of the building. He thought about the years he had spent here, working himself into the ground for a company that saw him as nothing more than a number. He thought about the moment he had found the children in the tunnel, and he thought about what it would mean to let them die. By morning, his mind was made up. He would take them to the old freight hangar beyond the colony walls. It was dangerous, but if they could reach it, there might be a way to get them off-world. He knew a pilot who owed him a favor. Joran gathered what little he had: a small pack with water, a ration bar, and a worn thermal blanket. He gave Lyra his spare filter mask and adjusted Kale's so it fit more securely. "We leave tonight," he said. "The storm will cover our tracks." Lyra looked at him for a long moment. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Joran's voice was steady. "Because someone once helped me when they didn't have to. Now it's my turn." As the day passed, Joran kept to his routine to avoid suspicion. He worked his shift in the mines, his body aching with every movement. Varric passed by once, his eyes cold and calculating. Joran forced himself not to look away. When night came, the storm outside was fierce. Winds howled through the narrow streets, carrying red dust that stung the skin. Joran led the children through the shadows, avoiding the main paths. Every sound made him tense. Every flicker of light made him fear they had been spotted. They reached the outer gates, where the old maintenance tunnels connected to the abandoned freight routes. Joran knew the security here was weaker, but it was still a risk. He used an old access code he had memorized years ago. The gate opened with a low groan. Beyond it lay the wasteland, a stretch of open ground where the storm raged without mercy. The hangar was somewhere out there, hidden in the swirling dust. Joran tightened the straps on his pack and looked at the children. "Stay close to me," he said. Together, they stepped into the storm. The wind pushed against them, and the dust made it hard to see more than a few steps ahead. But Joran kept moving, one foot in front of the other. He knew there was no turning back now. The cost of kindness had never felt so real. But as he glanced at Lyra, guiding her brother through the storm, he knew it was a price worth paying. The storm on Orion 9 was at its worst when Joran led Lyra and Kale across the open wasteland. The wind tore at their suits, and the red dust stung their skin. Each step felt heavier than the last, but Joran kept moving. He knew the old freight hangar was close. Through the swirling haze, the dark outline of the hangar appeared. Its massive doors were half buried in sand, but still intact. Joran guided the children inside, sealing the door behind them. The sudden silence was almost shocking after the roar of the storm. Inside, the air was stale but calm. Rows of abandoned cargo containers lined the walls. In the far corner, a small light flickered. Joran walked toward it, and a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was Selric, a cargo pilot Joran had known years ago. His hair was streaked with gray, and his eyes were sharp. "You look like trouble," Selric said. Joran gave a tired smile. I need a favor. I need you to take them off-world. Selric studied Lyra and Kale. He saw the sickness in the boy's face and the determination in the girl's eyes. Where would I take them? He asked. Anywhere safe, Joran replied. Somewhere the company can't reach them. Selric hesitated, then nodded. I can do it, but it will cost something. Joran glanced at Lyra. She stepped forward and spoke quietly. We know where there are supply caches, food, medicine, enough to help hundreds. Selric's eyes widened. That's worth more than credits, he said. Give me the location, and I'll make sure you're never found. The deal was made. Joran helped the children onto the small freighter. Kale leaned against his sister, too weak to stand on his own. Joran stepped back, watching them from the hangar floor. Lyra looked at him. Come with us, she said. Joran shook his head. If I go, they'll follow. You'll be safer without me. The engines roared to life. The freighter lifted slowly and shot upward into the storm. Joran stood alone in the hangar, the sound fading into silence. He knew he might never see them again. Years passed. Joran's life in the colony ended when the company accused him of breaking contract terms. He was sent to a penal moon, a place where prisoners worked until they could no longer stand. The air was thin, the food scarce, and the guards merciless. Joran aged quickly there. His back bent further, his hands shook, but his spirit remained unbroken. He thought often of Lyra and Kale, wondering if they had survived. He hoped they had found a place where the sky was clear and the air was clean. One day, the guards came for him. They told him his sentence was over, but instead of release, he was to be executed for defying corporate orders. The announcement was made without emotion, as if it were just another task. Joran was led to the open yard where the execution platform stood. The cold wind cut through his thin clothes. He looked up at the gray sky, ready to face the end. Then a sound broke through the air, a deep, steady hum that grew louder. The guards looked up as a sleek ship descended into the yard. Its hull was silver, polished, and marked with a crest Joran did not recognize. The ship landed, and the ramp lowered. Two figures stepped out. Joran's breath caught in his throat. It was Lyra and Kale. They were no longer the frightened children he had met in the tunnel. Lyra stood tall, her eyes steady and commanding. Kale, healthy and strong, walked beside her. Both wore the insignia of a Free World Alliance fleet. Lyra spoke to the guards with authority. This man is under our protection. Release him immediately. The guards hesitated, but the sight of the ship's weapons convinced them. Joran's restraints were removed. Kale stepped forward and smiled. You saved us when no one else would. Now it's our turn. Joran felt a weight lift from his chest. He had not been forgotten. They guided him up the ramp and into the ship. The air inside was warm and clean. Joran sank into a seat, feeling the hum of the engines beneath him. As the ship lifted off, the penal moon grew smaller below them. The gray sky faded, replaced by the endless black of space. Joran looked at Lyra and Kale, pride and relief in his eyes. Where are we going? He asked. Home, Lyra said simply. A place where you can rest. A place where no one will ever hurt you again. Joran leaned back, closing his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt safe. The stars stretched out before them, bright and endless. And in that moment, he knew that kindness, once given, could return in ways beyond imagining.